Hey, what is up guys? It's your boy Speed here, and today we're back with episode 2 of the Downside of Heroes. This is the series where I go in alphabetical order through every single Dota hero. We're going to be doing 2 strength heroes, 2 agi heroes, and 2 int heroes, and I'm going to tell you about these heroes, and particularly what I'm going to tell you is about the downside of these heroes. What are the weaknesses of these heroes that you can abuse in your games to dominate, and let's get into it. Also, I want to tell you guys that if you've been struggling with solo queue and you're looking to get to the next rank, I'm going to be able to help you. Like, literally, with the gameleap website, I'm going to give you guys guides that are going to make it unbelievably clear on what you need to do. So if you've been stuck in the solo queue grind, you don't know what to do, and you want to become absolutely broken, but like actually, you want to become much better at Dota, and you want to take it more seriously, the gameleap website is going to help you do that. So click the link down below. I'm going to help you get to the next rank, and I'll see you there. The first one for today is Axe. Axe is a very common offlaner and initiator, but he has some major downsides, and is a big reason why this hero actually isn't very popular in the pro scene, even though its win rate right now at this current point in Dota is actually pretty good. The first one is the hero has pretty bad armor at level 1, which means that the hero can be punished pretty hard in the early laning stage. So what you should keep in mind is if you have some sort of aggressive lane, keep in mind a Blightstone on either the support or the carry, and running at the axe. It's very common that, especially if the axe does not buy a ring of protection, that you'll be able to shred through his HP pool even if he takes counter helix. The second one is Yule's Scepter of Divinity. At any point in the game, Axe's major way of doing damage is actually blade mail, right? It's blade mail and then of course counter helix. However, neither of these do any damage if Axe gets Yule's. Therefore, if you are any sort of hero that doesn't have to completely grief their item build to buy a Yule's, you should consider a Yule's if the axe is snowballing, if he's the major threat, right? If he's doing a lot of damage, because whoever he goes on, if you can use the axe, they won't take blade mail damage and axe won't spin and the call won't do very much damage at all. The next thing is that he lacks damage against certain heroes. Compared to a lot of initiators in the game, Axe kind of has a specific archetype of hero he likes playing against. He really, even compared to other initiators who also generally hate these heroes, Axe really hates playing against heroes like Necro and Veno. Because not only do they kind of annoy his Blink Dagger, but even when he calls them with Blade Mail or Counter Helix, neither of these heroes do any damage to Blade Mail or proc counter helix. So he has certain matchups that are just really bad. Let's compare it to something like a Pangolier. There's not a single hero in the game that Pangolier can't really chain stun. There's not a single hero that, like, let's say Mars Arena isn't pretty good against, right? You know what I mean? Like, the Mars combo just kind of does a lot of damage inherently. And so yeah, it acts as a little bit unreliable in that regard. And finally, it requires a good amount of farm to do things. Heroes like Pango and, and Mars, just as an example of more meta top lane, top offlane heroes, don't need a Blink Dagger to do things. They can have a lot more impact in a much more reliable laning stage without items. Axe kind of requires decent matchups, or at least an understanding of when to lane and when to cut wave, to make sure that he can do stuff in the game. Because if you don't get to your Vanguard timing, you're extremely susceptible to being ganked. You have no disengage compared to other heroes. Call is a horrible disengage spell. Your W Battle Hunger is mediocre. Mars can spear people away, Pango can swashbuckle, shield crash, and roll, so you don't really have a good way to disengage. So Axe is very easily ganked compared to other offlaners, right? He has no disengage. This is always the case throughout the game on Axe. He never has disengage, which is kind of a problem of the hero as well, but he requires farm to do stuff. So you'll see pros if an Axe is picked for one reason or another, which he's not picked a lot, because you can see he has quite a bit of downsides, is that if he gets ganked a lot and falls behind, he's one of the worst initiators in the game. Because with just a blink, he does limited damage, and if he doesn't go Vanguard, he's like squishy and is like the easiest offlaner in the game to kill. Alright, next up is Beastmaster. Staying with initiators, he has some very hard counters. The first one is Enchantress and Shen in lane. Also, you could probably put Crystal Maiden here with the Frostbite of the Boar. But basically, any hero that can take the Boar out of the lane makes this hero a pretty freaking weak laner. Like, yeah, you can take Wild Axes to substitute, but that's not very great. It's like kind of meh right now. And so yeah, there's some heroes that just dominate Beastmaster, and oh my god, If you fall behind on Beastmaster, this hero is tragic, in my opinion. Yeah, it still has a stun, but it's kind of a long cooldown and isn't that great. It doesn't do that much damage. The boar, if you fall behind, is trash. Helm of the Dom, the later you get it, the worse the item is, besides for the heartbeat creep, but that's not how you want to play Beastmaster. So if you lose your lane hard on this hero to an Ench or to a PA, for instance, like Ench PA, should dominate this hero in lane. Like, I've literally seen games like this. When this hero gets dominated, it gets dominated because it doesn't have a good way to cut waves. It doesn't have a good way to secure range creeps unless you take Wild Access, which still isn't that great. And so it can get crushed. So keep in mind, if you see a Beastmaster picked and you have last pick, understand its counter heroes. Stuff like Troll Warlord in lane, stuff like PA, if you can kill him early on and put pressure when Boar is shitty at level 1, you can really make this guy have no game. On top of that, he falls off hard into the mid-late game. Beastmaster, kind of like, if he wins his lane, he's like the best hero in the game in a lot of games for the first 15 to 20 minutes. This hero can own. It can control 30% of the map alone due to its units and hawks, and it can make the game completely unplayable in certain areas. So in a good Beastmaster game, this hero thrives for the first 25 minutes of the game, but then it kind of falls off. Yeah, it's still a BKB disable, still can give vision, which is like why it doesn't fall off that hard in pro games, because it's still like a hard stun through BKB, and it still is a vision hero, but, you know, in pubs, meh. And finally, it struggles against Lincolns. It just, you know, it just struggles against Lincolns. Like, I don't know to tell you, it can't pop it any other way. Technically, it can take over creeps that can, if I'm not mistaken. It can buy 4 staff, but like, yeah, just struggles against Lincolns. Next up is Bloodseeker. I'm going to be focusing mostly on Bloodseeker carry. I don't think Bloodseeker offlane is very good right now, ever since they got rid of the Ags. It's not horrible, but it's not great. But alright, let's talk about Bloodseeker carry. So, he can struggle to do damage due to the nature of his spells. So, Bloodseeker is one of those carries that, against the wrong team comp, can really have a hard time. And here's why, okay? Number one, he struggles against like heavy magical damage comps in the early game, right? If the enemy team has like, let's say a Puck, and then a Coddle, and then like, you know, the other support is like, I don't know, like a Hoodwink, there's a chance he'll just get exploded because you don't have that high of an HP pool in the early game. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And the thing is, you have to like face plant into heroes to do damage, right? If you rupture someone, you still got to run up to them to do damage. If you blood rate them, I mean, great, you silence them, but you still got to run up, right? And you might be like, oh, Speed, how is that not the case for other carries? Well, think about it. Think about the other carries. Slark has a defensive ulti, he has a defensive Q and a defensive W. He can kite in and out. Jug spins. Omni Slash makes him invulnerable. PA can kite in and out much more easily, right? Something like Sven, he does burst damage, so he doesn't have to stay on the same target for a long period of time. The problem about Bloodseeker is he doesn't really burst anybody, and as a result, it's kind of this weird thing where it's very easy to set up on Bloodseeker. And so, yeah, he can really struggle against these comps, and you should actively fight him if you think you have the counters, like I mentioned, right? These like magical damage heroes. Also, staying together is good. Like just naturally playing together against this hero in team fights is kind of nice. Obviously, don't get hit by the blood right by 3 or 4 heroes, but if you avoid that, even when he ruptures someone, once again, it's hard for him to run in. However, Bloodseeker has a hard BKB timing, so keep that in mind, right? Like this hero pre-BKB is pretty freaking weak. Unless like everyone's already low HP, which in that case, his team's probably just winning the fight anyway. Next up is that he doesn't really man fight the majority of mega carries. That's why this hero, if you're gonna pick it as a carrier, even as an offlaner, it kind of needs a good lane matchup because it doesn't necessarily flash farm that quickly. This hero's not the greatest farmer. And then it doesn't man fight the majority of the mega carries, right? It's not gonna win a man fight against something like a TB Scotty. It's not gonna kill a Naga at any point in the game. It's never gonna be able to man up to a Sven who's equal or ahead on net worth. Realistically, the Sven's gonna be ahead. And so you might be like, what does this hero do well then? You're just shitting on its speed. Well, that's not the point of this video, but I will say that, once again, it can really dominate lanes. However, that is why, if you're against a Bloodseeker in lane and you're in a bad matchup, please, number one, look to drag the wave in between the tier 1 and tier 2 tower, and look to side pull, and try to ignore this hero for the most part in lane. Next up is Bounty Hunter. We're going to be focusing on Bounty Hunter as a support, because that's primarily what it's played as. First things first, Bounty Hunter hates Deathball. This hero despises when people giga group up. Against heroes and team comps that kind of group up and smoke gank and, you know, look to take towers with long range poke, Bounty Hunter really struggles in. Yeah, he can throw out the occasional track and shuriken, which is, you know, something, and it's decent, but it's never going to be able to de-push the wave, right? And this is probably the biggest disadvantage of Bounty Hunter. The hero has no way to clear waves, and it generally has no way to get, like, heroes off a tower. You know, something like a Hoodwink, you have to be careful when it's in the area, right? Bounty Hunter, it's like, he can be annoying and he can set up, but if you have decent disengage, the hero can't really go in. You know, like, so if you group up around a tower, and this is why you're not going to see something like a Bounty Hunter in a lot of pro games right now. If you group up around a tier 1 tower, or like, you make a coordinated play, Bounty Hunter just doesn't really do very much in the fight. He just won't. If he tries to go on a support, he'll probably die overextending, and if he tries to go on a core, it's like rough, you know, you're walking up to a core is really hard. And so you have to play this outside of the fight track shuriken style, which, you know, once again is decent, but it's not like ownage, right? It's not crazy. And so if you collapse in a mid tower, there's a high chance the Bounty Hunter won't be able to do anything about it. And that is the big disadvantage of this hero. On top of that, if you're playing against Bounty Hunter, please put down wards and sentries on top of each other. So instead of just putting down a ward to scout out areas, you want to put down a ward sentry so you can generally scout his movements. With 1 or 2 of these ward sentry combos, you can often track where Bounty Hunter is going, as long as you put them on like decent hills near staircases. And then his whole like scouting tactic will often be in vain, and you'll be able to see, you know, where he's coming from or where he's going, what he's trying to scout. Next up is Batrider. This is a weird one. I don't think really anyone understands Batrider, but let's talk about some of his downsides and some of the ways to counter him. Number 1, he has huge cooldown gaps. Okay, you might be like, what are you talking about? Is it just lasso? The biggest one here is actually Firefly. Batriders, you know, fly up in the air and create flames ability. The biggest issue with this ability is that all throughout the game, it's a 15-second duration flat. The lowest the cooldown ever gets to is 34. That means in the laning stage, the cooldown is 52, right? So even at max, there is a downtime, right, of 19 seconds. At level 1, there is a downtime of 37 seconds. There are huge gaps where this hero doesn't have Firefly. When Batrider doesn't have Firefly, he's immobile, he's generally easy to gank, and you should take advantage of that. For instance, one of my favorite heroes to play in the game is Nature's Prophet. Something I pay very close attention to when I'm against Batrider is Firefly cooldown. If he uses it, I'll wait till it's about to end, and then I will gank him. And you might be like, oh, that's kind of specific, right? Because then you can sprout him and he can't fly out of it, right? So like that's specific, but it's not really specific because the reality is this hero gains 12% movement speed from Firefly, right? And bonus vision. However, when that ends, he's probably not going to see you coming. And by the time he sees you coming, let's say it's part of a smoke gank or just you're wrapping on him and he's farming mid, due to his lack of bonus vision and lack of movement speed, he'll have no good way to disengage. Sticky Napalm and Flamebreaker are okay, but once again, it's not great, and you'll likely be able to kill him because he won't be able to threaten you back. So even if a fight breaks out, let's say it's early game, there's a decent chance he just won't have it. So it's a little bit difficult to do this, but take advantage of when you see him use Firefly. If he clears a mid-wave with it, look to smoke gank him. If you bump into him, you're most likely going to kill him. Next up is Lotus Orb. It's like funny, it's just like Lotus Orb, but yeah, it's just like the perfect item against this hero. You know, you reflect the lasso and you purge Sticky Napalm. The reality of Batrider is purges are always just going to be good against this hero. Your Abaddons, your Omni Knights. Oracle is kind of weird because lasso is very good against Oracle. But and so is the bonus vision of Firefly. But in general, Dispels are very good, and Lotus Orb is probably the best one you can generally buy on a huge percentage of the Dota hero pool. It just kind of really messes up Batrider in the mid to late game. And finally, Batrider has no objective damage. So often what will happen in Batrider comps is if you pick this hero mid, number one, it's not going to gank, right? And even if it does gank, like let's say it ganks a side lane, it's not going to take the tower. This hero also doesn't really kill the mid tower. So all in all, it has to spend a good amount of time of the early game farming bots, right? It's like actually a farm hero. Batrider is primarily a farming hero. So it doesn't create any objective damage. It doesn't really threaten any objective. And so if this hero cannot threaten heroes or you manage to gank him a couple times, he's going to have to just farm for the majority of the early game because that's just how Batrider works. He can't really pressure towers. And, you know, he's very cooldown reliant as well. His ultimate being a very long cooldown, like, if he doesn't have good matchups, he'll often need lasso to kill people, and you can keep that in mind as well. Anytime he doesn't have lasso, you can TP away from him. And yeah, basically you can avoid Batrider ganks like this, right? Keep track of the lasso cooldown. It's kind of like, you know, Rupture on Bloodseeker. Something I could have mentioned as well. You can always TP away from Bloodseeker. That's kind of like common knowledge, but it's a good thing to reiterate. And same thing with Batrider. There's a big time in the game where he just doesn't have a stun as a mid laner. A lot of mid laners that are tempo heroes have stuns. Storm does, Void Spirit does, Ember does, Invoker does, Tiny does. You know, like you can think of most tempo mids, they're going to have a disable. You can't TP away from them. Batrider, you can. And finally is Chen. The first counter or downside is Spirit Vessel. He doesn't really have any way to dispel. He doesn't buy dispel items. So you throw it on anyone you're going on and you might be like, oh, right, like you're throwing a Vessel on, let's say like a PA, right? Usually it wouldn't do that much. But if there's a Chen on the enemy team, he's very heal reliant. So anytime there's heals like this on a hero like Chen that don't have a dispel, funny enough, a lot of heal heroes have dispels. Abaddon, Omni, Oracle all do. I guess Dazzle doesn't, but like you can see the point, right? The Vessel is incredibly good here, and it's just a hard counter to the hero in general, so it's really nice to have. Next one is he lacks side lane pickoff. So if you're having a hard game, let's say Chen kind of ran you over in lane, and then it's very hard to fight into his units. That's often the case with Chen, right? This hero is very dominant for the first like 15-20 minutes into the game when Hand of God is like kind of a crazy ability, and when you hit level 7 and all of your units are like really, really strong. There's like this 10 to 20 minute gap in the game, right? The time on the clock when Chen just pops off. However, during this point in the game, Chen still has a dilemma where he lacks side lane pickoff. It's very hard for Chen, unless it's like the greatest Chen player of all time, to pick people off in side lanes. Like yeah, he can try to get a net creep, but then like a lot of Chens aren't going to take the net creeps right now. And so often Chens will just focus on pushing towers in a lane, and so often you can just avoid him, right? When the enemy team has a position 4 Chen or a position 5 Chen, you know they're just going to lack the ability to kill you in a side lane and in a lot of situations. And as a result, you should push your limits more, right? If you see that the enemy has Chen, you should be aware, okay, I'm probably safe, right? I should be avoiding him early on into the game if I can't kill his creeps, and I should be looking to split up the Chen, right? Because the hero doesn't like that, right? Chen does not want the game to just be a split push fest unless the heroes are really, really slow and he can pick supports off in the jungle. Then it's fine for Chen. And then finally, like the last thing I want to mention about Chen is that his Holy Persuasion is a 15-second cooldown, which is huge. So if he has to take over 4 creeps, it takes him a whole minute to do that, minimum, right? Because there's also like cast times, and then sometimes you're not going to find a good creep. So like it can, let's say it takes Chen on average like a minute and 15 seconds or a minute and 30 seconds to take over a full set of creeps. That means if you kill off his set of creeps, Chen just has like an ultimate worth of downtime where he has to go find more creeps. And on top of that, he has to take away the gold from his teammates in a lot of situations. So essentially, this might sound basic, but it is important to note how important how strong it is. If you can kill Chen creeps, to kill the Chen creeps. Like, if you have the opportunity to kill off 4 Chen creeps, you should basically see it as almost better than a kill, because you're gonna get like 240 gold from the creeps alone, and then Chen has to spend a huge amount of time where he's just practically worthless getting more creeps. While he's doing that, he's gonna take the creeps from his carry, and so yeah, like it can be like a 5 to 1,000 net worth gold swing to kill off, if you really think about it, Chen's creeps, because even when he doesn't have creeps, he won't be able to put any map pressure really as well. So there's definitely quite a big downside to this hero in that. I just want you guys to be kind of aware of that, because I'm sure most of you guys are not Chen players, so you don't understand how devastating it is to lose a good set of creeps. And that is why the hero can fall off into the late game. Hand of God definitely falls off. Penitence is like always a strong ability, but it can be dispelled. He doesn't really have any stuns, so like in general, if you can split the map against Chen, avoid the death ball, and then kill off his creeps in the mid game, which is probably your goal anyway, but I just want to emphasize on how important it is, then you're going to be able to beat Chen. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one, and I'm out. Peace.
And that's all, but remember, before you leave, before you tune out, subscribe to the GameLeap website, where we are going to help you get to the next rank. If you're stuck, click the link down below, and I'm out. Peace.